A black woman sat alone in an upscale restaurant, wearing simple clothes and carrying an old backpack. Other customers stared, whispered, and some even laughed. "She doesn't belong here," one woman said loud enough for everyone to hear. The woman kept her head down, pretending not to notice. Then something happened that silenced the entire restaurant. The owner walked out from the kitchen, saw her, and tears filled his eyes. He walked straight to her table, knelt down beside her, and said two words that changed everything. "Thank you." What those cruel customers didn't know was that this woman had saved the owner's life 20 years ago. And the reason she looked poor? She'd spent every penny she had helping others. This story will restore your faith in humanity and show you why we should never judge people by their appearance. Before we dive into this beautiful story, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share real stories about kindness, respect, and karma. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now let's see what really happened. Grace Thompson was 58 years old. She had spent her entire adult life as a nurse, working in the emergency room at City General Hospital. For 35 years, she'd saved lives, comforted families, and worked double shifts when the hospital was understaffed. Grace grew up poor in rural Alabama. Her mother cleaned houses. Her father worked in a factory. But Grace dreamed of becoming a nurse to help people. She worked 3 jobs to put herself through nursing school, studying late into the night after exhausting shifts at diners and gas stations. When she finally became a nurse, Grace made a promise to herself. She would treat every patient with dignity and compassion, regardless of who they were or what they looked like. Rich or poor, black or white, everyone deserved her best care. Over the years, Grace became known at the hospital as the nurse who never gave up on anyone. She held the hands of dying patients who had no family. She fought with insurance companies to get people the treatment they needed. She used her own money to buy medicine for patients who couldn't afford it. But all that compassion came at a cost. Grace never married, never had children, and never built savings. Every extra dollar went to helping someone else. Now at 58, she had finally retired. She lived in a tiny apartment and survived on a small pension. Today was special, though. It was Grace's birthday, and she decided to treat herself to lunch at Bella Vista, an Italian restaurant she'd walked past 1,000 times but never entered. She'd saved $30 from her pension to have one nice meal. Bella Vista was the kind of place where business people had lunch meetings and wealthy families celebrated anniversaries. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, fresh flowers on every table. The cheapest meal cost $25. The owner, Michael Romano, had built this restaurant from nothing. He'd immigrated from Italy 25 years ago with just $200 in his pocket and a dream. Now Bella Vista was one of the most successful restaurants in the city, but Michael never forgot where he came from. He remembered what it felt like to be looked down on, to be judged because you were different or poor. He tried to create a welcoming atmosphere for everyone, but he couldn't control how his customers behaved. When Grace walked into Bella Vista at noon on Tuesday, she was immediately self-conscious. Her clothes were clean but old, simple black pants and a plain blue blouse. She carried an old backpack instead of a purse. Her shoes were worn but polished. The hostess looked her up and down with barely hidden disapproval. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, ma'am," Grace said politely. "Just me. Is that okay?" The hostess sighed. "I suppose we can find you something." She led Grace to a small table in the back corner near the kitchen door, the worst table in the restaurant. Grace didn't complain. She sat down, placed her backpack beside her chair, and looked at the menu. Everything was more expensive than she'd thought, but she'd come this far. She ordered the cheapest pasta dish and water. That's when the whispers started. Grace tried to focus on the beautiful restaurant, the paintings on the walls, the soft music playing. But she couldn't ignore the stares. At the table next to her, 2 women in expensive business suits kept glancing over and whispering. Grace heard fragments. "Doesn't belong here. ... Probably can't even afford. This neighborhood is changing." Across the room, a wealthy-looking couple actually pointed at her while talking to their waiter. The waiter glanced at Grace and shook his head sympathetically, as if to agree that she was out of place. Grace felt her face grow hot with shame. She knew this was a mistake. She didn't belong in places like this. She should have just bought groceries with that $30 and eaten at home like always. When her water arrived, the waiter set it down without a word and hurried away, as if he didn't want to be seen serving her. Grace pulled out an old paperback book from her backpack, trying to look occupied, trying to pretend she didn't notice the judgment all around her. Then it got worse. A woman at a nearby table, emboldened by wine and her friends' laughter, spoke loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear. "I can't believe they let just anyone in here now. This used to be a nice place." Her friends giggled. One of them added, "Maybe she's looking for the soup kitchen. I think that's 2 blocks down." More laughter. Grace's hands trembled as she held her book. She stared at the pages but couldn't read the words. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to cry. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. The businessman at the table behind her spoke to his colleague. "This is exactly what's wrong with this city. No standards anymore. Anyone can go anywhere." His colleague nodded. "I'm telling you, we need to find a new lunch spot. This place is going downhill." Grace wanted to stand up and leave, just walk out with whatever dignity she had left. But her pasta was on its way, and she'd already spent the money in her mind. She couldn't afford to waste it. She sat frozen, enduring the judgment, feeling smaller and smaller with each passing minute. The worst moment came when her pasta arrived. The waiter set it down quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the attention Grace was receiving from other tables. Just as Grace picked up her fork, a young man in an expensive suit at a nearby table called out, "Waiter, I asked for the check 10 minutes ago, or are you too busy serving everyone to take care of your actual customers?" The emphasis on everyone was clear. He was talking about Grace. Several people laughed. The young man's friends high-fived him like he'd made the joke of the century. Grace set down her fork. She couldn't eat now. Her throat was too tight. Her hands were shaking too much. She reached for her backpack, ready to leave her untouched food and escape this nightmare. Maybe she could ask them to box it up. At least she'd have dinner. That's when she heard footsteps approaching. Heavy, purposeful footsteps. Grace looked up, expecting the waiter to tell her she needed to leave. Instead, she saw a man in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. He wore a chef's coat with Michael Romano, owner, embroidered on it. His face was pale, his eyes wide with recognition, and he was walking straight toward her. Michael Romano stopped at Grace's table. His eyes were filling with tears. His hand went to his chest as if he could hardly breathe. "Grace," he whispered. "Grace Thompson?" Grace looked up, confused. She didn't recognize him at first, but then something in his eyes and his voice triggered a memory from long ago. "Michael," she said slowly. "Little Michael from the hospital." "Yes," Michael's voice cracked with emotion. "Yes, it's me." The restaurant had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now, confused. Who was this woman that the owner knew? Michael's eyes scanned the room, seeing the uncomfortable faces, the judgmental stares. His expression changed from joy to anger. "Did someone say something to you?" he asked Grace quietly. "Did someone make you feel unwelcome?" Grace shook her head quickly. "No, I'm fine. I was just going to—" "Don't lie to me, Grace," Michael said gently. "I saw people staring when I came out. I heard whispers. Tell me the truth." Grace's eyes filled with tears. The kindness in his voice, after all the cruelty, broke something open inside her. "They said I don't belong here," she whispered. "And maybe they're right. This isn't a place for people like me." "People like you?" Michael's voice rose, and the anger in it made several customers shift uncomfortably. "People like you?" Michael turned to address the entire restaurant. His voice was loud, clear, and shaking with emotion. 20 years ago, I came to this city with nothing. I was 32 years old, and I'd worked 3 jobs for 5 years to bring my mother here from Italy. She was sick, very sick. We couldn't afford good health care in our village." He looked at Grace, then back at the restaurant. "One night, my mother collapsed. I brought her to City General Hospital. She was dying. The doctors said there was nothing they could do. We had no insurance, no money. They were going to send us away." Several people in the restaurant looked down, ashamed to be listening to this story now after how they'd treated Grace. But one nurse refused to let that happen. This nurse, Michael pointed at Grace. "Grace Thompson, she fought with the hospital administration. She called in favors. She worked extra shifts to personally care for my mother. She used her own money she needed for herself, to buy my mother's medicine." Grace was crying now, shaking her head. "Michael, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he said firmly. "My mother lived because of you, Grace. She lived 8 more beautiful years. She got to see me open this restaurant. She got to be proud of her son, all because of you." Then Michael Romano did something that stunned everyone in the restaurant. He knelt down beside Grace's chair. The owner of Bella Vista, a successful businessman, knelt on the floor of his own restaurant. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with tears. "Thank you for saving my mother. Thank you for your kindness when everyone else saw us as nothing. Thank you for being an angel when we needed one most." Grace was openly weeping now. "You don't need to thank me. I was just doing my job." "No," Michael said, still kneeling. You did more than your job. You saw us as human beings when everyone else saw us as problems to be ignored. You gave us dignity when we had nothing." He stood and looked around the restaurant again. This time his voice was hard. "This woman you've been judging, laughing at, making feel unwelcome. She is the reason I have a mother's grave to visit. She is the reason I could become the man who built this restaurant. She is the reason I learned that kindness is the most important thing in this world." The restaurant was completely silent. Several people were crying. Others couldn't meet Michael's eyes. "From this day forward," Michael announced, "Grace Thompson eats free at Bella Vista for the rest of her life, and anyone who has a problem with that can leave right now." No one moved to leave, but several people looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. The atmosphere in Bella Vista changed completely. The hostess came over, tears streaming down her face, to apologize to Grace. "I'm so sorry. I judged you by your appearance. I'm ashamed." The two businesswomen who'd whispered cruel things approached Grace's table. "We're sorry," one of them said. "We had no idea, but that's no excuse. We were wrong to judge you." Even the young man who'd made the joke about the waiter came over, his face red with shame. "Ma'am, I apologize. What I said was cruel and ignorant. I'm truly sorry." Grace, gracious even in this moment, accepted each apology. "It's okay. We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." Michael refused to let Grace's pasta go to waste. He personally cooked her a fresh, elaborate meal, the best dishes Bella Vista had to offer. He sat with her while she ate, and they caught up on 20 years of life. Grace learned that Michael's mother had passed away peacefully 8 years ago, surrounded by family. Michael had gotten married and had 3 children, and he'd never forgotten the nurse who'd saved his mother's life. "I've looked for you," Michael admitted. "I went back to City General several times over the years, but they said you'd moved to a different department. I wanted to find you and thank you properly." "You just did," Grace said, smiling through her tears. Word of what happened at Bella Vista spread quickly. One of the customers had recorded Michael's speech on their phone and posted it online. By evening, the video had 500,000 views. By the next morning, it had 5 million. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. "This made me cry. We need more people like Grace in the world. I'm ashamed to say I've judged people like those customers did. Never again. Restaurant owner is a class act, and that nurse is a real hero." Local news channels picked up the story. They interviewed Michael, who used the platform to talk about the importance of kindness and not judging people by their appearance. Grace was reluctant to be interviewed, but she finally agreed to one local news segment. "I just did what any nurse should do," she said. "But I hope this story reminds people to treat everyone with respect. You never know what someone has been through or what they've done for others." The story inspired people across the country. Restaurants started putting up signs. "Everyone is welcome here. Everyone deserves respect." Nursing organizations shared Grace's story as an example of the profession's values. City General Hospital honored her with a special recognition award, even though she'd retired. But perhaps the most meaningful impact was personal. Grace received hundreds of letters and emails from people telling their own stories. "I was a nurse for 40 years, and your story reminded me why I chose this profession. I was homeless once, and a nurse like you helped me. Thank you for representing all the angels I've met. I'm ashamed to say I've judged people for being poor. Your story changed my perspective." Several of the customers from that day at Bella Vista reached out to Grace privately to apologize again and to make donations to nursing charities in her honor. The young man who'd made the cruel joke donated $10,000 to a scholarship fund for nursing students from low-income backgrounds. "I can't take back what I said," he wrote, "but maybe I can help create more nurses like Grace." 6 months after that day at Bella Vista, Grace's life had changed. Michael had made her a VIP member of his restaurant, and she came for dinner every Sunday. But more than that, she'd become a symbol of something important, the invisible heroes among us. Michael's 3 children now called her Aunt Grace. His restaurant thrived even more because people wanted to eat at the place with such a beautiful story. But Grace remained humble. When a reporter asked her what she wanted people to learn from her story, she thought carefully before answering. "I want people to understand that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. That person who looks homeless might have given everything to help others. That person who looks poor might be richer in spirit than the wealthiest person in the room. My mother used to say, 'Grace, treat everyone like they're carrying something heavy because they probably are.' I've tried to live by that my whole life. And one more thing, don't wait to show kindness." Michael found me after 20 years, and I'm grateful. But imagine if we all treated each other with respect and gratitude every single day. We wouldn't need dramatic reunions to remember the good people in our lives. We'd be celebrating them all along. The story of Grace Thompson and Michael Romano became more than a viral moment. It became a reminder that our society often values the wrong things. We judge people by their clothes, their possessions, their appearance. We forget to see their character, their sacrifices, their humanity. Grace spent her life giving to others and ended up with nothing material to show for it. But in the end, her kindness came back to her in ways money never could. She found family, respect, and the knowledge that her life had mattered. Michael never forgot the woman who saved his mother. He built a successful business, but he never let success make him forget where he came from or who helped him along the way. And the customers in that restaurant learned a lesson they'd never forget. Before you judge someone, before you laugh at someone, before you decide someone doesn't belong, remember that you don't know their story. You don't know what they've sacrificed. You don't know who they are. Because that person sitting alone, looking out of place, they might be the very person who saved the life that made everything else possible. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel right now. We share real stories about kindness, respect, and the power of compassion. Drop a comment and tell us, have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return? How did it feel? Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss stories that restore your faith in humanity. Thanks for watching, and remember, kindness is never wasted. It always comes back. See you in the next story.